Thanks, everyone, and welcome to the Balance, Isolation, and Control Your Cloud Projects, Teams, and Customers. My name is Tim Tam, Principal Product Manager, and with me is Joanne Lay. Joanne?
Hi everyone, Joanne Lay. I'm a Master Principal Cloud Architect at Oracle. I'm looking forward to talk to you guys about how to use different strategy to isolate your workload in OCI.
Next slide. So in today's session, we're going to talk about how you can utilize your tenancies and its supporting features to be able to securely scale your business on OCI. Again, I'm Tim Tam, Principal Product Manager who works on a number of different products and solutions to be able to help customers scale on OCI. Today, we'll be talking about the tenancy structure, various customer models in which to apply the tenancy structure, as well as integrated services. And then finally, we're going to go into the roadmap. And with me today to co-present is Joanne Lay, who is an expert in the field, and she's worked on a number of multi-cloud projects and as well as ML implementations. Joanne?
Thank you, Tim. Yes, my name is Joanne Lay. I am an enterprise cloud architect here in Oracle. I work with customers like enterprises and SaaS providers to understand their technical requirements and help them to design the architecture and deploy those solutions on OCI.
So whether you're a brand new customer starting out your cloud journey or an existing customer with a developed business, we think it's important that we cover some of the foundational things to better understand kind of like the current landscape of OCI and the integrated features you can use to be able to grow your business. So today, we're going to be going through the tenancy structure as well as the organizational structure to apply to your specific business needs. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Joanne. Here, a couple of key concepts that we believe that all customers should be aware of is kind of the organizational resource hierarchy. So if you're a brand new customer, you probably will work with OCI to provision a tenancy or a cloud account. And really what that enables the user to do is be able to use the suite of OCI services to be able to provision things like compute or database or storage resources, as well as platform services such as cost management and identity management. When you have your tenancy, you can start provisioning your resources, but as customers start to grow and start to develop their business, they may need to be able to segment their businesses. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about today is what is the right level of isolation or segmentation across your organization. You can do things like within a single tenancy structure, develop or build out compartments, which allows you to be able to segment or isolate certain teams or cost centers or applications. And as you continue to grow out your business into an enterprise, you may want to start using a thing we call organizations, which is this multi-tenancy structure for further isolation. So what Joanne's going to be talking about today a little bit is kind of the differences in terms of the pros and cons of using a tenancy structure versus a compartment structure, and how that applies to various customer use cases. So whether you're a single business or an enterprise business which resells to other customers, it's important to think about how you want to isolate your various teams or your customer segments. So next slide, please. And here, Joanne's going to be talking about some of these capabilities.
Yes, so with organization, the access control is enforced at the tenancy, or you can say account level. The IAM instances inside the tenancy operate independently from others. So this model offers the strongest isolation model for your most strict compliance requirement. Compartment on the other side are relying on IAM policies to implement access control. For example, if you have a special project, you can group those resources inside this special project compartment and then write IAM policy to grant permissions to access those resources inside this specific compartment. With organizations, you have the feature called governance rules, where you can use it to enforce governance at tenancy level. For example, you can configure and control which child tenancy can have access to can access to what services using quota, and also where they can deploy the workload in which OCI regions. On top, you can also control which child tenancy map to which subscriptions. They can be mapped to the same or different subscriptions. With apartment compartment, they are all under the same tenancy, but you still can use compartment quotas to control inside each compartment what and how many OCI resources they have access to. Like for example, you can configure only a certain type of compute shapes that this compartment can use, and for some other very expensive shape like GPU shape, you can configure down to 0. So in that case, they will not be able to access any of those compute shapes. And you also have the freedom to set up budgets that you can set alarm whenever the spending on a specific compartments has crossed the threshold. But the key concept here is with organizations, the parent tenancy, which is your organization root, although they can spin up child tenancies, they do not have any inherent access to any resources inside your child tenancy. In that sense, enable you to implement the security principle of separation of duties. And then also because the IAM is a completely separate entities, you can map to and federate with the same or different identity provider. And with compartment, the tenancy admin, which is your root compartment, has full access to everything, including all the compartments inside this tenancy. So what you can do is you can delegate access at the compartment level from your tenancy admin. And of course, because organizations is by tenancy, so services and API throttling limit is applied at per tenancy level versus in compartment, those limits will be shared across all the compartments inside the same tenancy. And of course, you can use compartment quotas to control to a certain degree. So what I want to point out here is this is, even though organization and compartment, even though they are similar, they is not one or the other. They actually can be quite different. And our customer use both of them complementary to create a structure that fit the business models and their operation needs. Later in the presentation, we're gonna show some common patterns that we observe from the field and share with you guys.
That's a really great point. Yeah, customers use them in conjunction with each other for that strict isolation for across tenancies, but they can further segment their business or their applications by compartments. So how do you start using organizations? One of the things we actually developed was a feature which allows customers who already have multiple tenancies, or maybe even just starting out, to be able to scale and grow the number of tenancies that they've already started using. So before I move along too far, I do want to point out a couple of things. So here we have tenancies which are child tenancies, and another child tenancy which is a parent. And these particular types of roles mean a lot within the organization. So a child tenancy is really where we would suggest that customers provision their workload to be able to segment by teams or applications or cost centers, business units, whatever is meaningful to them. And they're really going to be isolated from each other. So in this example, tenancy 3 has no inherent access to tenancy 3 or 2 and 3. And another thing I note is that the parent tenancy actually is the one we recommend to have central governance and visibility across the entire organization. This is a tenancy that customers use to be able to administer across the org, to be able to manage things like costs, governance, share a subscription, and to be able to continue to scale. So as customers, or as you start thinking about growing and developing more and more teams, this is the team that you would go to in order to spin up a new tenancy. And another feature of organizations is that you don't have to contract with Oracle each time you want a new tenancy to develop a new environment or application. You can just you use your existing UCM subscription. So if you have multiple tenancies consuming from one UCM subscription, it helps you in a lot of different ways. Some of them being that the amount of credits that you've contracted with in your subscription, they're fully utilized, or they're utilized across your your tenancies, so that they can be more utilized. Another thing is that the discount rate card of your subscription gets applied to all usage across the organization as well. And this really gives the parent tenancy the ability to essentially report on costs. And I'm going to be diving a little bit deeper into that further in the presentation. And another thing that the parent tenancy can do is enforce certain restrictions on child tenancies. So as they continue to grow and as they continue to invite or create new tenancies within the org, you're able to apply things called governance rules, which I'll also be going into further in the presentation. So here,
now,
oh, go for it, Joanne.
Yeah, so here we're going to go through several models and explain to you guys the reason behind why is it being laid out that way. And here I have an example of an enterprise, how they design the compartment and tenancy design. In a typical enterprise, you will have different LOB, with each has its own IT resources to operate or develop the in-house applications. Then also you will have the central IT department that provide company-wide IT services. And inside the central IT team, you usually will have teams like network team, security team, or the cloud team. And in this scenario, the cloud team will be managing the parent tenancy as the organization root. And so the cloud team will be responsible for spinning up tenancies for all the LOB as well as the infrastructure team. And they're also responsible to enforce governance at the tenancy level. So inside each LOB, you can further use different strategy to divide your environment. For example, in LOB1, the strategy is to use compartment to separate prod, dev, and test environment, versus in LOB2, the team is organized more centered around applications. So they decide to separate the environment using compartment for individual applications. So you have compartment for App 1 and App 2. And then for the infrastructure tenancy, you probably have a network compartment, a security compartment, and most company has a shared services compartment to host their common services like AD, logging, monitoring, CI/CD, pipeline tools, and such. And typically in an enterprise, you will use a single identity providers. So in this case, you can federate that identity providers to all your tenancies, but you can create different IAM group as needed for each tenancy to manage their environment. Another example is for SaaS customers. So what I'm referring to SaaS is company that host applications on OCI in their own tenancy and offer those applications as service for their user to consume over the internet. And due to the multi-tenancy nature of SaaS, they have some unique set of challenges. Challenges like tenant isolations, data partitions, and cost attributions. And often this company will have to manage a large number of OCI tenancies. In this case, organization can help them to streamline their operations. The picture here shows that this SaaS provider use tenancy as a way to isolate the prod from their dev test environment for the general customers. So say, for example, inside the prod or dev test tenancy, they further isolate each customers using compartment. And so here is showing that, for example, you have a dedicated customer A compartment just for customer A's prod environment. But they also will have some special customers, either due to the size or the high compliance or regulation requirements that require to have the workload deployed in a dedicated tenancy. So here I shows that for customer S, the workload is deployed in a dedicated tenancy on the right-hand side. And then also they have their own dedicated identity provider federated with the tenancy. In this case, this design enable a completely separate entity for this customer to operate, and it will share nothing with any other customers. So switch gear a little bit, going back to the enterprise example and continuous on that. Remember we mentioned a lot of time they will have common services like AD logging monitoring tools deployed in the common services VCN in order to enable access path so that LOB1 or LOB2 can access those resources in this common services VCN. The network team, the central network team, would deploy a dynamic routing gateway, DRG, which is in the network compartment, which essentially is a virtual router that act as your network hubs for your OCI routing, your OCI cloud environment. So the network administrator would then attach this DRG to the shared services VCN inside the same infra tenancy. And it also will attach this DRG to the VCNs that are crossed to those other LOB tenancies. And of course, you can use the same DRG to establish on-prem connectivity using VPN or Fast Connect. Notice that in this network topology is not limited by any tenancy boundary, and is decoupled from how you structure your organization and tenancy. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the top, the parent org tenancy on top does not even have any network connectivity to any of the child tenancy, just because it doesn't have the use case that you need to access services in the child tenancies.
Yeah, so what Joanne was talking about was, it was very interesting because whether you're an enterprise within a single business or you're a SaaS reseller, you want to think about how exactly you want to isolate your tenancies, how you want to scale your business, and how you want to share resources. And one of the benefits of using organizations in any of those models is that there are platform services that are integrated with organizations natively, and you'll be able to do things like cost management and governance across your entire multi-architecture organization. One of the big things is cost management. So as you continue to grow and scale, you want to be able to have some insight and perspective into your child tenancies in your organization. So you can imagine the LOBs that Joanne was talking about. Like if I want to be able to view costs and manage each of those tenancies or groups of tenancies, how do I do that? So some of the tools that we've given customers is the ability to integrate with some cost management products. So you'll be able to use, as the parent tenancy, use cost analysis and be able to create dashboards and reports for your entire organization. You'll be able to do things like filter by tenancy and then group by meaningful dimensions like services, regions, tags, etc. As you continue to grow and as you want to integrate with other BI tools, you may want to also have Excel or CSV extracts, so which comes in the form of cost reports. Here again, it's a consolidated report across your entire organization at the hourly granularity for all your cost and usage information that's within your within your organization. I listed out a few of these different products, but one of the other ones I also want to call out is Cloud Advisor. So with Cloud Advisor, it's a tool that customers use to be able to identify opportunities within your tenancy or organization. We go through and evaluate your tenancy's resources to identify opportunities across cost savings, performance, high availability, as well as some other categories. And we actually recommend you to be able to change the shape or to be able to modify the resource in a way where it helps you optimize your tenancy. And finally, governance rules. If you don't mind going to the next slide, sorry, actually, this is cross-tenancy policies first. So Joanne's going to talk about how we can actually have two tenancies communicate with each other using cross-tenancy policies. And then finally, I'm going to go through governance rules.
Yeah, so continuous on with enterprise example, you might want to have the central network team to manage your cloud network environment for all the tenancies, including the LOB. So for the network team to do that, they will need to have the required permissions in all the LOB tenancies. And since if you remember we stated previously, there is no inherent permissions from the parent to any child tenancies, and each tenancy's IAM is operate completely independently. So to enable this kind of remote tenancy access, we can use cross-tenancy policies. Cross-tenancy policies works in a pair with the endorse and admit statements. So you will need the endorse statements in your source tenancies. Source tenancies means where your IAM principals are located. In this case, it will be your network administrator in the infra tenancy, and then your target admit statement in the target tenancy where your OCI resources are located. So in this case, will be your LOB tenancies. And in this example, I also list the detailed IAM policies that as an example for you to reference. If you look at the right-hand side, you have the endorsed statements, IAM policies, and you first will define the LOB tenancy using its OCID, and then you can use the endorsed policy to allow network admin to manage the network resources in these LOB tenancies. Likewise, on your LOB tenancies, you will need to define IAM statements, and you first started with defining the infra tenancy using the OCID, and define the network admin with the OCID. Then afterwards, you can use the admit statements to allow the network admin from the infra tenancy to manage your network resources.
And finally, one of the another powerful tool that you can use within organizations is called governance rules. Here, you're able to have tenancies that have opted in to governance rules, be able to be enforced by the parent tenancy, and have the parent create rules such as service restrictions, allowed regions, and tags onto your child tenancy. This really gives the parent tenancy the capability to set some compliance or set some security standards across their organization. And it also ensures that the child tenancy is meeting those security compliance standards. So it gives the parency peace of mind as they continue to scale. So right now we allow the parent tenancy to write things like quotas as a governance rule and push it to a child tenancy. And when a quota is pushed to a child tenancy using governance rules, the actual quota itself is locked. So even the child tenancy admin is not able to modify or delete that resource. And it really gives the parent tenancy the capability to be able to essentially govern across their entire organization. Okay, so finally, we want to talk a little bit about our roadmap and give you guys something to look forward to. Next slide. So some of the things that we want to do is continue our momentum with governance rules and apply things like more security services with governance rules. A couple of the services that we're going to integrate with first are CloudGuard and security zones. And this really gives customers the ability to really enforce that security posture that's really important to them as they continue to scale. As you know, with security zones and CloudGuard, you're able to write statements within policies for very specific rules. And then also in the future, we also want to offer more organizational reporting capabilities. So here we're thinking about an experience where the organization admin is able to have a centralized dashboard to be able to view across their entire org for metrics and telemetry that is going to be meaningful to them. Next slide. And I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for attending the presentation. Hope you learned a lot. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either me or Joanne.
Thank you, everybody.